It's no secret that we are absolutely in love with SUVs, but it's taken some car makers a little bit longer to respond to that demand. One of them is Alfa Romeo. In more than a century of building cars, the brand has never attempted a high-riding wagon, until now with this thing, the Stelvio. It's got all the classic Alfa Romeo design cues, things like a deep shield grille, a sportier stance, pretty low riding for an SUV, and things like big exhaust pipes. Yep, no one is going to confuse the Stelvio for any other brand, which is a good thing. There's a lot of same in that SUV category. It is, after all, a fairly familiar formula, but Alfa has tried to inject some of its heritage in there and stand out a little bit visually. The theme continues inside as well, where there is a hint of raciness, things like the start button on the steering wheel, the metal finishes in the centre console, and even the graining on the dash. It's just that little bit different. But the deeper you dig, it is clear where Alfa's priorities lie. The centre screen, for example, it's a bit of a joke. It's nicely integrated in there, it looks okay, but the navigation looks very 1980s. The reversing camera is tiny, it doesn't use the whole screen, and the image isn't particularly sharp. That's a shame, because elsewhere the controls are simple and easy to use. Big dials and knobs gets the job done perfectly. In the past, Alfa Romeos have been oozing Italian flair. This one's got hints of it, but it pulls it back ever so slightly. You can probably blame that a little bit on the Yanks. It's a very important car for America, so in some ways Alfa has to play it safe. That's important given the competition. You're talking BMW X3, Audi Q5 and Mercedes-Benz GLC. They're all big hitters, and there's that German dominance there, so trying to muscle in on that will take some serious clout. At least Alfa Romeo has come out swinging. There are 4 models in the range, which starts with this base Stelvio from just under 70 grand. You can have the same basic car but with a diesel engine, or you can opt for a more powerful engine and get more gear in the TI. Or go straight to the top of the pile with the QV or Quadrifoglio, powered by a barking twin-turbo V6 with some Ferrari pedigree. Even this base car is pretty well specified. You get some pretty snazzy looking 19-inch wheels, some nice looking leather inside, electrically adjusted front seats, and plenty of safety gear. You're looking at auto emergency braking, blind spot warning, those sorts of things. Our car's also got some extras thrown into the mix, things like the Harman Kardon sound system and that big sunroof. But Alfa Romeos have never really been about how much gear's packed into them, nor are they necessarily the last word in value. They're drivers' cars. They are designed to be driven. You get that as soon as you take off in this thing. It is very, very clear that corners were a huge part of the development process. It absolutely devours them, and it feels so alert. There's a real liveliness to the way it tackles those bends. If anything, the steering is actually a fraction too direct. You've got to reprogram yourself and just remind yourself to put in slightly smaller steering inputs, otherwise you're sort of darting all over the road. Fortunately, there is heaps of grip. It's actually a really competent SUV. More than a hint of that Alfa Romeo flavour. The equation isn't quite as rosy when it comes to the engine. This one is obviously the base model, 2-litre 4-cylinder turbo. You're looking at 148 kilowatts. Nothing special, not exactly undernourished, but when you step on it, it's got some zing, it goes okay, not out of this world. And if you do want that maximum performance, you have to rev the engine just that little bit harder. Yes, it's got 330 newton meters of torque, but there's not a whole lot in that mid-range. I partly blame that on throttle response and on the 8-speed auto, which, while it does a decent job, it's a little bit limited in these 3 modes. You've got this D&A knob here, dynamic, normal, and advanced efficiency. Now, that latter one is sort of code for I'll use less fuel, but it'll be very dull while I'm doing it. So forget about using that one then, which leaves N for normal. You'd think that'd be okay, and in some situations it is, but you've just got to step on the throttle a little bit more, at which point the transmission then works it out and says, okay, I'll change down a gear or 2, and off you go. Or you go for dynamic and it's a little bit too far the other way, a little bit frisky with the throttle response, and a bit too eager to jump down a gear or 2. I just wish there was a mode that I could program and dial up the throttle, the transmission, the steering exactly the way I want it. Which in some ways sums up the Stelvio. It's genuinely impressive and really good fun in a lot of ways, but quirky and occasionally flawed. Some people are going to love it. Others, they'll just divert straight to the safety of those German rivals. Shame on them for at least not giving it a go.